Okay, go for it.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Board's work session for Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. Can I get a motion to open up the work session, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the first item on this evening's agenda is a continuation of our discussion of proposed revisions to the form-based code. And we have with us this evening our Director of Planning, Sabrina Charney-Hall, as well as our attorney, Jen Gray, who are going to walk the town board through the remaining topics.
Good evening, everyone.
Wait, can I just say, if I drop off, it's not because I'm ignoring you. The internet's really weird, like you're all freezing. So I'll be back as fast as I can if I drop off.
If we notice you drop, we'll stop. You know, I know this is an important topic for everybody. I don't want to.
So I thought I would start by recapping the discussions from Friday. We had gone through several of the 8 categories that you guys, we had asked for direction from regarding the different elements of the form-based code. The one area we had asked for folks to put their thoughts into writing was the process, and 4 out of 5 of you had commented, and the majority agreed with the process as it was. And Jen Gray. So that's where we stand with that. And, you know, at this point, just to kind of bring comfort to everybody, the discussions that, you know, we're asking you for direction for are just to get a sense. Of course, there's more information that will come through the FGEIS and the technical work that needs to be done on that document in relation to the DGEIS that will help refine what we're talking about. I can summarize for you. On Friday, we talked about public notice. We talked about the review process and board approval, the public process. We spoke briefly about affordable housing. We discussed the landmarks and historical properties. We had a discussion about building height. And we started to talk about architectural details, and I don't think we finished that discussion. And then the last item for discussion is the actual boundary of the North Greeley district. So those are the topics we have tonight. We also talked about parking on Friday. So I think we're ready to continue the discussion on architectural detailing, unless somebody has a different recollection or would like to focus on something else. Okay, let's talk about architectural review right now and what it looks like in our existing code. In the existing code, there's very little guidance when it comes to architectural detailing. You know, there's a similarity, dissimilarity. There's a little bit more information than there used to be due to updates that were done probably 2 years ago. But in general, the direction of today's code is very generalized. The proposed code actually has a lot more detail regarding architecture than the existing code, where we have general architectural details regarding design, massing, the location of the building, and things of that nature. It also includes building orientation, facade treatment, the vertical proportions are discussed, materials and colors, the glass and window perspectives in detail, and then there's specific detail on 6 architectural styles. And those architectural styles were derived by the consultant team based on the existing architectural styling in the hamlet today. So nothing that's listed in the proposed code is something that nobody has seen before. Comments that we've received about the architectural detailing are to open up the styles. Don't limit them to 6. Remove Italiante styling. Allow contemporary. All the detail regarding style is not necessary. One of the most helpful discussions regarding architectural detailing was with the Architectural Review Board. You know, they are a board that deals with architecture on most every building permit that comes into the office. So, you know, they had suggested a different process whereby the architectural styling, the 6 styles, be opened up and have another category, a more general or as approved. So that there's flexibility if somebody really wants to do something that's different and do it well. We also discussed taking the level of detail that exists in the proposed code for the architectural styling and putting that in a compendium to be provided to applicants when they make application. It gives them an idea of what we're looking for without putting it in our code to be heavy-handed on the architectural regulation. So the proposal is, as it stands right now, as I've written it to you, is to keep the front part of the architectural section, which talks about the location of the building on the site, the orientation, the vertical relationship, the windows, the massing, to keep that level of detail, but to take away the architectural stylings and make that part of application materials so that the applicant has more specific guidance regarding the styling without being heavy-handed in the code. So that is the proposal before you. I think that proposal originated in discussions with the Architectural Review Board. There's also been discussions kind of at what point does the architecture become examined? In today's process, architecture is not examined unless it is through a special permit and a referral to the ARB. Or more prevalent, it is something that's attached to a building permit process. So anything of a certain dollar value gets an automatic referral to the Architectural Review Board. The one staff specialty that we do not have in town is an architect. Okay, you have a planner, myself, you have an engineer, you have an environmental coordinator, but we do not have a town architect. There are several different ways it can be handled if you want the architecture to be examined during the application review process by a consulting architect. The other avenue is to instigate the ARB during that application review process, or to let it wait until the building permit stage. So those are kind of your 3 choices that are outlined. You know, I think that if we look at either or, it's a matter of getting an architect's eyes on the plans to ensure that they're consistent with the code. And not so much the front part that we're leaving with the code, but really the architectural styling that's in the code. Jen, do you want to add anything to that?
Just, can I ask you a question, which is,
Sure.
you laid out a couple of options. An architectural consultant versus ARB was one. And then the other that I heard was having that architectural review be a part of the application process up front versus having it occur during the building permit process. Do you have a recommendation for the town board as to which of those options you think, based on your, you know, conversations with the ARB and your professional expertise, you think?
I don't. I know the ARB would love to remain involved. The question gets back to timing. And understanding, you know, what's currently on agendas, how often they meet, and really kind of coming up with the most efficient process. The building permit process and ARB review is super efficient. You know, it happens in a very timely process. The 2-tiered approach that we have recommended through, you know, the pre-application meeting and then a deep dive on the application materials, and then the application receives a certificate of completeness and can apply for a building permit. It's whether or not the architectural detailing is part of that certificate of completeness.
Sabrina, was there any discussion about not necessarily having the entire ARB, but perhaps a couple of members of the ARB?
There was,
taking review?
absolutely, like having one or two of the members, maybe the chairman and another member, or even just two out of the 5 members of that board, do an earlier review for consistency with the code and the styling. And then the question is, do you want it to go to the ARB as part of the building permit process? And again, you know, the style guide, if we call it a style guide, that we will produce as part of an application materials, that combined with the existing details in the code are pretty specific, right? So to have 2 members of the ARB review it early on, and it may negate the need for the entire board to review it during building permit review.
Is there a way we could leave that determination with the 2 members of the board as to whether or not there's something unique about this particular building that would warrant additional, you know, review by the full board, or, you know?
I like that, Jill.
Jen, what do you think of that, Jen?
Yeah, I think that can be built into the process. If you're talking about during the application review stage by staff, you know, to have the chairman and 1 or 2 other members of the ARB, less than a quorum, come in as part of that application review process, give their 2 cents, so to speak, as far as the application's architecture and its consistency with the code, and leave it to them to decide, based on what they're seeing, whether a full ARB approval should be required during the building permit stage after the applicant has demonstrated compliance with all the other zoning requirements of the form-based code.
Yeah, there was also a desire by the ARB, and this can be worked into the application materials, to provide a narrative of how the building is consistent with the historic character and the existing architectural character of the hamlet, you know, to kind of put some words and meaning behind the building design. So it's not just getting elevations and plans, but a story behind that.
And Sabrina,
they
I'm
want
sorry
that
if you.
Sorry.
I
Yeah.
missed both of those.
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna ask, did they want that for all applications or only for those that use
They weren't
sort of
specific.
option 7, you know? Because in my mind, if you're using one of the 6 prescribed architectural styles and you're following that style guide to the T, you should be consistent with, you know.
Yes.
I don't know that you need
If
to
you had
then
another,
also
if you
previous-
had another style you really wanted to
Got it.
use.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, and to that point, you know, if you're going to be awarding discretion to those 1 or 2 ARB members that are going to be involved in the application process, the authority to decide whether a full ARB approval is going to be required at the building permit stage, you will want to build in some kind of standard for them to use to make that determination, to exercise that discretion for when it's appropriate to trigger that full approval.
And Sabrina, you were saying in terms of efficiency before, how is the efficiency of the architectural review board?
Typically, it's 1 meeting, 1 or 2 meetings. The ARB is not a long drawn out board, because by the time applicants are going to the ARB, it's in the midst of a building permit process.
So you're adding a little extra layer of protection that really doesn't have a huge impact on the
Correct.
particular.
Right.
Correct. But again, we don't want to be too repetitive, because the prescription in the form-based code is very specific and
Right.
detailed. It really takes away the flexibility of the board to exercise other authority. And that's the nature of the form-based code.
So it's just in these limited situations that are beyond the 4 corners of our.
Correct.
Yeah, or somebody pushing the envelope, you know.
Correct.
Maybe the full board would want to take a look at it and see.
Right. And we can build in those measures.
So at the point at which they're at the building permit stage, the architectural review board had a recommendation for a change. Like, does that end up being actually quite a big deal for the developer because they've moved so far along in the process? Like, would it be better to have this determination earlier in the process? Did I lock up?
No, thinking about the process and when they come in with a complete application, I would prefer an earlier review than a latter review, right? Because that certificate of completion measures up against all of the elements in the code and the environmental review. If it's then going to be changed by the ARB through the building permit process, that could cause conflict.
Yeah,
Right. So what I hear from folks is that it would be best if it's within the 6 styles that we know, that review occur and be part of the completeness review, the certificate of completeness review. If there's a set in that 7th category.
I interrupt you to pause for just a second. I want to make sure we've got Lisa. She keeps coming in and out. And
oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Maybe she's having some trouble. So let's I don't want anybody to miss the conversation.
Okay.
I see your name, but I don't see her and I don't hear her. Maybe Jill's on the phone with her? No?
No, do you want me to suggest that she shut it off and turn it back on again? I'm not the IT guru here.
Yeah, I'm not either.
She can't get back in. I think she's trying.
Maybe she could try
here again. Your name. Oh, now I see your face too.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on today.
No, don't worry about it. I think.
All right, so let me summarize.
Paused when you dropped. So
yeah, no, and so I was just kind of summarizing what I'm hearing and kind of the best way to make a proposal for you guys to consider. So what I'm hearing is perhaps we look at under the 6 styles that are in the code. If something measures up to those 6 styles, it's part of the certificate of completion. If the applicant chooses to go with the 7th category or any other style, that activates the Architectural Review Board. And that process probably should occur prior to issuance of the certificate of completeness.
Right.
I think that's right. But I think also even if you're within those 6, even if you're following those 6, you still want to have a subset of the ARB look at it and say, yep, you matched. It looks right. Okay.
That's what I would argue for, is that there would always be Architectural Review Board consulting from the 2 members, regardless of style, because they would make a determination, I would imagine, on how successful the plan was and matching up with the style.
Correct.
The ones qualified to make that determination that you actually did successfully, design something in one of the 6 styles, and that they would then determine if a referral was required to the full Architectural Review Board, but that we would still, I think is what you were suggesting, want this process to be around the time of the application process and the checklist, rather than punted until building permits for the sake of planning and efficiency for everyone involved.
I think so. And so it's a question of whether or not it's a representation of the ARB as part of the certificate of completion, whether or not it's a consulting architect that's separate and apart from the ARB, or whether or not it's the entire ARB.
What would be the argument for a consulting architect when we have an ARB?
The argument is to have somebody that specifically focuses on interpreting the form-based code and not reviewing every building permit. It's just the volume of work and agendas. And now we're asking for an early activation process where they're coming in not related to a building permit, but to an application for a form-based code.
But to be clear,
So are you saying hire someone?
I would say, like we do now, when the town needs professional consultants to review projects, we take escrow and the applicant pays for that.
I don't have a problem with requiring that, but I feel like what I recall from our joint meeting was that the ARB was asking to play that role.
And very, very much so. So, you know, again, it's up to your board to kind of guide us as to what your preference is.
I mean, do we have to make that call? Can we say it's if the ARB is willing to play this role, fabulous, let's have them play this role.
Yep.
If they have an application in front of them and they feel that they don't have the time to commit to it, then the town can require, so, you know, have that as a fallback to be able to require the.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So
Would we have guidelines that if the ARB went, you know, the consultant option, would it just be for that primary review to determine whether it should be reviewed? It should be reviewed by the full ARB. Like, would that consultant be taking the place of those two ARB members that we're suggesting do the preliminary review, or that the consultant does the full architectural review?
I would suggest that if you're pulling in a consultant for any portion of the process, that they should carry it through for the whole process, even making that recommendation if necessary for the full ARB review at the end, at the building permit stage. But we can build in the discretion, you know, some flexibility into the code language so that it can be determined whether it's going to be a couple members of the ARB during the application process, or if based on workload at the time or scope of review, whatever it may be, it's better to trigger a consultant to come in at that time. And while I have the floor, I just want to mention, I have to unfortunately leave for another previously scheduled meeting. So I apologize to depart early. But I look forward to catching up on the rest of your discussion. Okay, thank you.
thanks, Jen.
So I have one question that I think I missed when I got knocked out, but what does the ARB want to do with this? I would like to hear if I would think that they want to keep control over this rather than bring in an outside consultant. So again, to Ivy's point, if they're willing to do this, I would much prefer to go with our Board of Architectural Review than with an outside consultant coming in. And then this is the part I might have missed though. Are we saying we are limiting it to those 6 styles, or we're completely not limiting it to those 6 styles? What are you proposing? It can be any style, or?
No, the proposal that is on the table is to maintain the 6 styles 1 through 6 as it's proposed in the code, because those are based off of what is in the hamlet today. We are going to include a 7th style, which is any other architectural style, but they have to provide a narrative and really the justification as to how it relates to how it fits in with the community, and then provide information that will be reviewed by the ARB.
So what if we don't like what if they have like an idea? I'm sort of channeling Gray Williams here a little bit. What if they have an idea for some fabulous modern building? And who is determining if a write-up?
The ARB would be.
Oh my God, I'm gonna scream.
Okay, you're back.
Okay, I'm back.
It would be the ARB.
Who's gonna determine if the write-up is appropriate as to if it fits in the downtown?
So the write-up will be contingent with architectural specifications that will be reviewed by the ARB. They very much wanted contemporary styling throughout, but they qualified that by saying as long as it's good. So the proof will be in the details. The proof is in the pudding. And you know, that 7th category will include the same level of detail as the other 6 categories, but it will be left up to the ARB, the Board of Professional Architects, to make the determination of good.
Right. And that there'd be an ARB review step regardless of the selected architectural style.
Yes, it's either
or they could opt out. and ask for a consultant.
Correct. Whether it occurs as part of the completeness review or it occurs as part of the building permit review.
Or Sabrina, I'm sorry, did I miss? I thought that you had mentioned in the pre-application review to have someone from the ARB, the chairman and another member. So because
Not in pre-application review.
Okay.
Not in pre-application review, when the application is submitted for completeness review.
Oh, because by then the applicant would have
The level of detail,
I
the
see.
architectural detail necessary for the ARB to weigh in on.
Okay.
I'm sorry, and can I just ask a clarification so I can follow? And who is it that triggers an independent consultant? I thought it was only if the ARB was unwilling or unable, not the applicant.
Correct, not the
So it is
applicant.
not the applicant.
No,
if
not the
ARB can't do it for whatever reason. Okay.
Correct.
Just want to make sure that was
Correct.
right.
Again, and again, it's really, you know, to get on an agenda for right now for the zoning board, the ARB, these are pretty heavy agendas right now due to the volume. And so we need a release valve in case we just can't manage it.
Okay.
To that point, unfortunately, I'm going to suggest, though, that if you're going with option 7, so the wild card style, right? So you're building contemporary, you're building modern.
That's different.
So, but what I was going to suggest is that I think we need to build in there that you don't just have the subset of the ARB looking at it as a part of the completeness check, but that I think that should automatically trigger full board review. As
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, if you choose to go to a style that we don't have the details on, it has to go to the entirety of the ARB.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, so that covers architectural details, and I think I haven't heard anybody disagree with kind of what we've been talking about, so that gives some guidance. The last item on your spreadsheet is the actual boundary, and that's, you know, that's to draw the line on the map that will be in the code. You guys we had produced a draft map, and I don't know if you're ready to do it right now. We produced a draft map for the moratorium that you modified. I'm not sure if that's the area you wanted to exclusively include in the code. I know legal needed more of an area description, so I wanted to make sure that that we
do you have the map? Not in the packet.
Yeah, I did not have the map. I can pull up a map. Hang on a minute. Let me pull in, let me share my screen and I can pull up a map. Let me know when you can see it and I'll move it around.
Mm-hmm.
And let me try and annotate a little bit so I can talk to you about it. Can everyone see it? So I believe the question is whether or not the line is going to run here. Let me move my page down. Of course, it does not go with the page. The question is, where on King Street do you want to draw the line, to be quite honest with you?
Well,
And
I think
on
this is part of the moratorium conversation, and I think the board was in agreement at that time that we were talking about the first property in on North Greeley. So not the properties that face Lower King Street, not the properties that face King Street, you know, the dry cleaner and Nicolay's, but that first property in.
So let me erase this. So draw the line here.
Correct. I mean, I think that's what we discussed. I don't,
So basically, if we draw the line there, are we including the first line on King Street, or are we starting with the second?
second.
Okay. And are we going up the back between this like this?
Yes.
And then we would follow the form-based district this way. You're on mute, Jill.
Is the big gray the post office?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna move let me clear my drawing. I'm gonna move up here a little bit. So now we're just about fully within. This is the corridor that we've been talking about. So then we would draw the line. Follow the boundary. Whoops. So sorry. We would follow the boundary.
It's pretty good.
My mouse got hung up.
Sure, blame it on the mouse. Go ahead.
Not everybody can be as good as Bob Cioli at this.
Yes, exactly.
Clearly. He'll be so pleased to know you remember his skills.
So this is ostensibly the boundary. Does everybody agree on that?
I agree.
So
I agree.
can we just be clear? So that's not the form-based code. The form-based code is still being studied for the entire hamlet, correct?
That's not the DGEIS. The
Correct.
study area is the entire hamlet. The proposed code that you will be considering at the end of the environmental review process will be focused on the area in purple.
So the legislation will only pertain to the area in purple.
Correct.
Got it.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, this seems to be the compromise. I mean, I have issues, but it's neither here nor there. So I'm willing to accept this as the compromise.
This is consistent with your latest decisions. Again, this is just the general idea of it to give us some more information, to put some words behind meets and bounds and whatnot for the proposed legislation.
I mean, I'm going to be the sole dissenter as usual, but that's not a surprise.
Okay. Is there any other? I don't think that there's, I'm going to stop sharing. I don't know if there's any other thoughts or direction that you wish to provide at this time. We are in the process of trying to draft some proposed legislation for you to provide the consultant team with some guidance on how to respond to certain public comments that have come in through the DGEIS public comment process. And all this information will be very helpful to completing the environmental record. So,
Serena, can you just explain for one more time, just getting back to the area? So if we're studying the whole 72 acres, but only applying it to that North Greeley area where you just drew, how difficult is it to then apply that to other areas later on?
you have to you'd have to consider legislative changes to expand the form-based code area.
But you wouldn't have to redo what will then be the FBIS.
If circumstances change from the time that the environmental review was conducted, you know, and they have to be real circumstances that have changed things or information has changed. You would have to do additional analysis. If a decade passes, you most likely would have to do additional analysis. If we're talking about a year, 6 months, maybe 2 years, you probably don't need to do additional analysis unless there's something that comes an additional analysis. Do you need to do the level of analysis that we've already done? You could probably supplement that analysis.
Okay.
I think this is really important because I feel like this is something that's being misconstrued. I'm reading on social media by people. The idea that a future town board could, you know, simply without having any public involvement, expand the area of the form-based district beyond the North Greeley corridor is simply untrue. So
no,
if the
you have an
legislative
entire
change-
legislative process.
Correct. And
which involves
that if
public
there's
hearing.
any potential additional environmental impacts that would result from the inclusion of that area, it might trigger additional environmental review. I mean, Nick, you can say
Correct.
that, but it's simply untrue that a future town board could, without any public involvement in any future process, just increase the size of the form-based district of its own volition.
Right, it would require an amendment to the zoning map to expand the district to cover that area, introduction of a local law, referral to the planning board, referral to the county planning department for their review and comment, and the holding and conducting of a public hearing, and going through the secret process, which may or may not trigger additional supplemental environmental review.
Right, but Sabrina's saying that you need significant changes to require even like 2 years, she said, may not even require.
I don't have
an
a crystal
additional
ball.
review.
Right, well, it depends on the passage of time.
But
and
it
the
needs
scope
to
of
be
change.
significant.
Well, let's not get.
Well, that only
like
pertains.
Two different
And
issues.
go-
Two different issues.
I was gonna say that pertains to the secret question, not to the public
Right.
participation.
Right.
Correct.
So may I
And
ask
how
you
many
for an
public
example?
meetings do you have to have? Like one, right?
I
Public
don't think
hearing.
it's helpful
No.
to talk about this in the abstract either, but
No, I'm just saying to change for a new zoning legislation, right? To change.
You have to
technically
hold
you
a
need
public hearing, whether or
Right.
not the town board wants to hold that public hearing for 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights. It's up to the purview of the board.
But to answer the question, there are actually
Okay.
several public meetings, right? I mean, there's at least one public hearing, but there's the public meeting at which it gets scheduled, the public meeting at which the public hearing is held, the public meeting of the planning board to discuss it.
Yeah, I
And
meant the
public
hearing,
meeting.
not the,
Yep, sorry.
all our meetings are public.
No, but
Right.
But Nick, I think that's very important because I don't want anyone on here to run with this theme that a town board can come in, a new town board, and say, let's just all of a sudden expand the zoning, the entire hamlet. The reality is that doesn't happen unless there's a real process in place, pardon me. And that requires many meetings, many opportunities for the public to be engaged, whether it's a formal public hearing or not. And again, then there's a time period that it remains open. And I'm not aware, and certainly you could, maybe this happen, but Nick, can you share, at least in your work with this town, but in other towns, and please tell me, if there's been an entire hamlet that's been rezoned, is it generally, at least your experience, of one hearing and done?
No, not
One
not
opportunity?
on zoning matters, no.
No. So, and then even if that for somehow happened, ultimately, if we included public land, even if it was rezoned, you would still have that right to permissive referendum to halt that process. Down the
So
road.
just logistically speaking, and just so I could level set a little bit, because, you know, we've gone through this process with North Greeley. Is this sort of like what it would look like if we expanded the form-based code district? So we'd go through where the building heights would land. We'd go through, you know, whatchamacallit, certain things, or so, okay. So because I think what my challenge with the current form-based, well, not the North Greeley section per se, but the expansion of it, like determining where it's appropriate to have 4-story buildings versus 3-story buildings. I think that still needs to be really fleshed out in the rest of the hamlet. I don't think that, you know, basically taking what it says in the draft should necessarily be the answer.
And there's opportunity at a future point in time to bring that up and raise that issue and revisit that issue.
Okay.
Okay, so right now we have been talking about the North Greeley corridor. I don't know if the board wants to look at the rest of the study area and make decisions on that now, because it's not really where you're heading with your legislation, or reserve that for a future discussion, because that is all part and parcel. When you're adjusting the zoning map and creating new legislation, you can make specific adjustments to the areas that you're talking about rezoning at that time.
And to that point, and Lauren, if I'm understanding your question correctly, we looked at seeker and we're seeing the possibility of 4 stories, the length of North Greeley, and we're discussing 3 stories as far as the form-based code is concerned. So we're not, seeker comes out and we have a decision that says, can accept, or 4 stories is doable, for lack of a better term. It doesn't mean a future town board or this town board has to be wedded to those 4 stories. They can go less, or 5, for example, it's 5 stories. We can do 4, we can do 3. So it doesn't lock, tell me if I'm wrong, Sabrina, what we do, we have today doesn't mandate that we have that maximum in the future.
Correct. It's a maximum threshold being established through your environmental review. If you decided you wanted to do 6 stories, we didn't study that.
Right.
Right. But if you want to reduce the stories and decide more specifically what street should be 3 stories versus 4 stories in a future application, the process that you would undertake at that time would make those issues part of the discussion.
Okay. All right. So I think everyone gets it. And I think the fact that we're examining from 4 possibly to 3 in one part demonstrates that if anyone were to say this would never happen, they're always going to go maximum. That simply is not the case. But maybe we should just move on to another issue.
So I will say that what I am really confident about is how we went through the process, because I think historically this town, as unfortunately it has, our process has been incredibly long and incredibly arduous and inefficient. And just thinking about how the applicant can go through pre-application, the completeness, as well as the building permit, and involving the core people in those steps in a timely manner is a huge deal. So I really thank you, Sabrina, for recommending what you have, because I think this will really, really give us what we need in order to revitalize our town.
Thank you, Lauren. You're on mute, Jill.
Sorry. Are we good with this? Ready to move on to our next comments? Thanks, Sabrina.
Okay, you're welcome. Everyone have a great night, and I'll see you soon.
Since we've lost Jen, Drew, Ed.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Dennis, you there?
I am.
Okay.
All right. So Dennis is here to speak to us about New York State DEC Hudson River Estuary Program grant for our local stewardship planning. I just want to talk to the board and introduce us to this grant proposal, grant opportunity.
Sure. So I guess to start, last year before we all would meet in this fashion, I think it was February of 2020, a member from DEC's Hudson River Grant Estuary Program came to speak to myself and the Conservation Board about natural resources inventories and, applying for funding, because obviously a number of the adjacent towns or nearby towns, I should say, have completed them in Westchester. And just to quickly read from their fact sheet, their definition being a natural resources inventory compiles information on important naturally occurring features within a given locality, such as geology, soil, streams, wetlands, forests, and wildlife. So that was sort of the generic. So last year, when the estuary program had grants, I think the focus was more of restoring fish passageways by removing impedances, such as dams and whatnot. So early this year, when Nate, I guess, reached out to me and asked if we were going to apply, I was, I'm not going to lie, I was unsure at the moment. But then I guess when Sabrina and Kellen approached me, I said, yeah, we might as well. It seems like that they've reduced the funding that's available, I think, for obvious reasons. But so at this stage, you know, the sort of the memo that I had prepared was just to sort of give you an idea of, you know, what we would be thinking about in terms of Newcastle, what would go into, you know, creating an NRI at this stage if we were to be awarded the grant and be able to proceed. So, you know, having this completed potentially, that if we were able to complete an NRI, it really does play into some of the programs and updates that were, you know, completed prior to me becoming the environmental coordinator. I know that there was an update to the conservation plan that identified a number of goals that I think, you know, would certainly overlap with having a better idea of and source for like a comprehensive single document or a resource where, you know, we can sort of go and get a better level of detail than, for example, obviously, you know, GIS is a great resource and you can go on and see where there's wetlands and you could see where there's floodplains and you could see, but it's, you know, a little bit, I would say, haphazard at best, because you're just doing that sort of on an individual basis based on an application or someone's particular request. But I think to bring all this information together, it really does allow for just sort of a better evaluation of those resources. And then as part of that evaluation process, I think one of them would tie into what is currently going on with respect to the update of the Parks and Rec plan, with the focus on sort of open space and resources.
Right.
And then ultimately, if there's any chance to either improve or, you know, increase in function from an ecological perspective, any of those spaces, or even add to the footprint of, should, you know, lands potentially become available, and would it make sense to, you know, connect or dovetail to those resources. So I think, you know, it would be a great resource to have. The proposal at this stage, the way I drafted the RFP, you know, in consideration of the grant award, in consideration of what I think it may cost to complete what I refer to as a desktop analysis, I think at this stage, it's better to sort of approach it in this more of a comprehensive overview sense. And then if in a subsequent stage we wanted to do, you know, what I kind of refer to as the ground truthing, it would be better, I think, to target areas, and it would just be, you know, a more efficient and economical approach, instead of, let's just start by putting, you know, a bunch of biologists running around Newcastle and doing inventories and just coming up with, you know, data. But at some point, data has to become, you know, information. And there's times where you really don't need to have a bunch of people on the ground to determine that, yeah, this park is a ball field and mowed lawn with a shed. You know, that you could kind of establish that from a desktop review. And I think that there is opportunity, even in this document, if we get to that point, where, courtesy of some of the work I had to do as part of the update to the Parks and Rec plan, I guess at Kellen and Sabrina's request, I kind of went around to a number of the parks and sort of did my own little mini inventory and habitat characterizations in accordance with the document of ecological communities in New York State. So I feel that information to me would be a good supplement for a selected consultant, you know, should they, you know, finish just their desktop portion, but now it's time to develop, you know, the text part of the report. I, you know, could provide all those summaries and say, listen, I have here, I think, some valuable information that, you know, should be included. And, you know, obviously you could source me as sort of being the boots on the ground, but I think it still would be worthwhile to put into that document. So I guess ultimately, you know, in order to apply for the grant, you know, a couple of the requirements from your level as a board is that, you know, we would need to prepare a resolution to authorize, you know, to have Newcastle to apply for the grant. and they are expecting a commitment of a 15% matching requirement of the requested grant funds. And at this stage, I, kind of did an estimated cost to complete for forward a desktop analysis would be just trying to think back to my former life of consulting, and I kind of was in that $40,000 to $45,000 range. And I believe the grants you're allowed to apply for up to I think $50,000 for each grant. Yeah, that would be the maximum, and the minimum would be $10,500.
Okay.
So that's kind of the uninterrupted, only take a few breaths overview, and obviously,
can I
please.
just ask one question, Dennis? I was just unclear with the information that was in the packet, based on what I heard you say tonight. The RFP that was in the packet that you prepared, is the intention to bring on board the consultant? Is the intention only to release that RFP if we are awarded the grant, or are we moving forward with obtaining the consultant regardless of whether we get the grant funding?
Fair question. As part of the application, they're looking for quotes. So we would have to release it prior to the grant. And I guess the reality would be is that if we were not awarded the grant, then there is no project to award.
So we would only then award the contract to the consultant who responded to the RFP, the winner, based upon our grant award.
Right. I mean, I try to, I'm happy to apply, and I think it's great that I have a relationship with this particular gentleman from DEC, and when I reached out to him, ultimately his comment to me was, understandably, I can't specifically comment on any of your, on your RFP or any applications prior to, you submitting a formal application, but he was at least able to get me some information as to how the, members of the DEC Hudson River Estuary program are sort of tied into the development of the NRI and at what stages they typically get involved with. So they're, sort of anticipated to work, with the consultant. So, in order to, I guess, come up with the cost for all of that, and that, as I said, has to be included on the application. That's why the RFP had to be developed, and the intention was to release it as a, on BidNet, Empire State Purchasing Group.
Great. So Jill, do we have a resolution to also do the RFP in addition to the grant?
Yeah, Christina, what do we have for approval tonight? You're on mute. I'm sorry.
No, sorry about that. No, we have the resolution prepared for tonight.
Right, for in support of the grant application, but also to allow us to release the RFP, to authorize the RFP issuance.
I don't, let me just double check, make
Maybe
sure.
we could just add a line on that resolution that would allow us to do both.
Yeah, and that's what we'll do. Let me review it and I'll make that change.
Okay. We should just make clear that the award of the RFP is contingent upon the
award of the grant. Yeah. Grant receipt. Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. Dennis, you're doing a really wonderful job getting all the ducks in a row for this application. We really appreciate it. I think that having the natural resources inventory in place would be great for us as a town. And I kind of like the idea of an army of biologists let loose on the town things, but I'll leave that to your discretion for the necessary number of running biologists.
You don't need any more of us, trust me. We're not a fun bunch.
Okay. Dennis, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Any other questions for Dennis? No.
Let me know when you need somebody to go ground truth with you. I'm ready. I've got my.
Yeah, I always welcome that. That's always great. I'm glad you guys appreciate that stuff. Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, Dennis. Thank you so much. All right. Have a good night.
Everybody.
Okay. The next thing on our agenda is authorization to award the RFP for professional consulting services for the proposed decommissioning of the Upper Mingle Dam. We received three responses to our RFP. Council has had an opportunity to review them and is
Right, so
supporting. Go ahead.
we spoke with Bob Silly, reviewed the RFP responses as well as the RFP that was issued itself. We asked Mr. Scioli to speak to a couple of companies who didn't submit a response, but had expressed or at least indicated for the bid net that they were looked at the proposal to determine why they didn't submit it. We got a variety of responses ranging from didn't have the experience to didn't have the time in their bandwidth to do it. Comfortable that the three we did receive were appropriate in terms of the range. One of them wasn't qualified. HVEA didn't have the appropriate experience with dams and more so with roads. The other one was a high bid by over $150,000 more than Tectonic, who is qualified and has an extensive experience. If you look through their RFP response of well over 50 or more other dam projects. So we've reviewed the RFPs and spoke with Bob Silly, are comfortable that it's in accordance with all applicable legal requirements and in accordance with the RFP proposal that was put out by the town, and that the town engineer's recommendation to award it to Tectonic is supported by those facts in the law.
Great, thank you, Nick. Does the board have any further questions on this? The next topic is authorization to set a public hearing for solicitation of comments on Verizon's cable franchise performance and community needs. And the proposed date is for May 4th. Nick, can you just give us a brief overview of this?
Certainly. The town has a franchise agreement with Verizon that expires in over 2 years, June 20th, 2023. The Federal Telecommunications Act sets forth a procedure for the renewal of those franchise agreements, and it's a multi-step process. One of the initial ones is that the town gets provided with a draft agreement that is not subject to FOIA yet, is still subject to negotiations, but there is an opportunity for the public to comment. In fact, we're required to receive public comments. And so the scheduling of a public hearing on May 4th is for that initial stage of the discussions, to receive comments from the public specifically for the purpose to ascertain what the town's and residents' cable needs and interests are, and to evaluate the current service and performance provided by Verizon. So as we go into these negotiations, are the town and residents receiving quality services and the type of services, and what are the future needs of the community? So those are the types of comments that the town board will be soliciting at the May 4th public hearing. And we'll take those comments and incorporate those into our discussions and negotiations as we go along this process with the renewal of the franchise agreement. Once we conclude those negotiations from a sense of having a draft ready, we'll bring it back to the town board. There will be a public process, opportunities for more public comment and hearing as we go through and discuss the actual franchise agreement itself. So this is a first of many other steps, and this is the first one where we're soliciting public comments so that we can have an informed discussion with Verizon.
Okay. And so there'll be a request for authorization to set a public hearing in the town board section of the meeting. Any
Nick,
further questions?
I just have a question. First of all, I have a comment because my Verizon internet's not working so well. Just saying. Who reviews the franchise agreement? Do you?
So it will be our office. We will do it with Rob Deary and Carrie and probably Lyle and Jill, and get feedback at the staff level. And then we're going to bring it to the town board and get your comments and before we start those negotiations.
Okay.
The next thing we've got on our agenda is interior renovations of the chat pack. The board will recall that they actually engaged an architect to do some interior design work to create a concession stand, a ticket booth in the vestibule area of the chat pack, the lobby. Bart and the guys from DPW have had an opportunity to take a look at the proposed alterations suggested by the architect. They've come up with an estimated cost of about $18,000. Our crews are finishing up the project over at Millwood Rec Field, and so they will be in a position to be able to come over to the Chapac and do these interior renovations. I provided the board with a list of proposed materials to be purchased. They include cabinets, counters, doors, flooring, light fixtures, sheetrock, lumber, drinking water fountains, not to be confused with the water fountain that's in front of Chapac. This is all internal. So there are traditional old brass fixtures that we're going to be removing and instead installing bottle fillers, and they come with separate water fountains that sort of resist the temptation that little kids have to like put their mouths on it. So
It's like what's in town hall now.
Well,
You can put your bottle
yeah,
under.
if you were in town hall, you would say it. You're right. You're right.
I see it right now. It's right behind me.
Yeah, it's actually in front of you, but that's okay.
I just want to say it just clarify, it wasn't just the architect that proposed what needed to be done. It was in long discussions with the Arts and Culture Committee too, who was very involved in the process.
Right. I meant it that we hired an architect to take and create the plans, and on the basis of the plans, the guys were able to come up with the materials list. Sorry.
Yep.
I shorthanded it, but you're right.
So understanding that this has been something that's been under discussion for some time, and I certainly don't want to delay the work on the renovations, particularly given that there's nothing really happening up at Chapac right now. So it's a great time to get in there and do the work. However, I do still very much want to have a deeper understanding of what the sort of checklist is with regard to the outstanding items that we believe are nice to have and need to have up at Chapac, but better understanding of the kind of long-term list of items that we still have to complete up there.
Yep, I can send that to you. Those are obviously not in the budget right now. Wouldn't fall even close to what we have left on what we bonded for renovations for Chapac, but I can certainly send you. I mean, they include, there's a big list of would be nice to have, including like putting a generator on there so we can have a warming area for, when there are blackouts, as well as entertainment during blackouts. And there are many other things, but I can send those to you. But those are all kind of, a lot of those are wish list items. Yes, it would be great to make that space much larger so we could have different types of artists in there later on. But that's something that really like the Friends group would need to raise money for. We need grants for that. I wouldn't advocate the town spending money on that right now.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to see that. And I think maybe the thing to do would be to put that on a public agenda too, so that everybody is aware of what it is we're working towards up at Chapac.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I guess, but I mean, we're not necessarily even working toward that. It's kind of like a future kind of pipe dream wish list that may never come true. I'm not asking the town, nor is anyone on the Arts and Culture Committee right now asking the town to even consider spending money on anything like that.
But you are asking the town to spend $18,000 on this particular list. And so it is helpful to us, as we've expressed before, to understand that within the context of the larger set of things that need to be completed, which is why we've been requesting this information.
Yeah,
so,
I'll send it again.
No, it's not again. I've never seen it. I've been asking.
Oh, Jill we all have it. I'll send it again. We've had
okay,
it for years.
we may be talking about two different things. So there are things like HVAC systems that are
Right.
need to have replacements. There is the whole issue of the ADA accessibility to the building. Certainly those are the two things that are foremost in our minds.
And that we talked about last year and the year before, that we were working with Summit Greenfield. Potentially there is ADA access to the building now in two spots, but we would like to be able to basically at some point take maybe the house next to it and redo the parking lot there and utilize it for chat pack. That's something that was discussed with the planning board, very involved. It was discussed with Toll Brothers. It was discussed with Summit Greenfield many, many times. But that again is something we were hoping to get as part of that negotiation with Toll Brothers and Summit Greenfield.
Lisa, can I ask, this is a little off topic, but I'm curious, is there anything planned for the chat pack in the near future?
There is, people are starting to rent it, yes.
What would be like the soonest event you think?
I mean, there are events that are that they were looking at in as early as May, people wanting to just rent it. Not for large events. There's actually still many requirements that we would need for people to be there, but they even want to rent it just so that performers can perform and just live stream it. They're not even looking for audiences right now. They're just looking for places to rent to perform.
Okay, thanks.
If we do have a list, which it sounds like we do, of the hierarchy of work that needs to get done there, I would love to have a chance to look at that and then perhaps do a walkthrough to just get kind of a mental picture of these things.
Sure. Have you not been there?
I have been there, but not through the lens of here's all the stuff that needs to happen to improve this building.
Got it. Okay. But I think we can do that separate from this, which we bonded for. Okay.
Certainly, yes. Proceed.
Okie dokie. The next thing we have up is modification of the triangle sign application. Nick, will you be able to talk us through those?
I will. So I'm going to share my screen. During the discussion of lawn signs, we looked at the town's banner policy and the triangle signs. The triangle signs is a limited public forum where the town can choose the message that it wishes to convey. And it's always being used for community events. And we had previously modified the banner policy, but there was benefit to clarify and make sure the two policies were consistent. So that's what you have before you, and that's our recommendation, that the policies be the same. So as you see up on the screen before you, we now have one policy applying to both the banners and the Chappaqua Millwood triangle signs. And this really goes towards what the town's goal is, which is community events. It's for public announcement of civic, cultural, charitable, educational, and public events that have town-wide importance. Banners and signs that advertise or promote commercial products or services or that convey political or religious messages are not prohibited. And then the statement below that the advertised event must be open to all members of the public on substantially the same basis as members of the sponsoring organizations, must not discriminate on a legally impermissible basis, and must be suitable for persons of all ages. So we're really taking the practice and what was the policy across the two different areas, the signs and the banners, and putting it into one form so that it's they're available to the public consistently, as well as for staff to be aware of and apply it consistently. So this would just require the adoption of a resolution by the town board.
Are there any questions on the proposed language?
Did we lose Lisa again?
Shows she's there, but on mute.
I think she's.
See if she comes back. And Nick, you here?
I'm here.
So just to reiterate, to be clear, this code has been on our books, and this code is something that you have seen or is implemented elsewhere, or something similar to this code.
Right. So this policy, if you will, right? So it's our property, so we don't have to have it in the code. It is, other municipalities have it. It's not unusual. It's consistent with what we've recommended and done in other municipalities, and have seen other municipalities who we don't represent do as well, both locally in the Hudson Valley as well as across New York State. And we've also, we've researched case law.
You're on mute, Lisa.
Lisa, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Lisa.
Your audio is
Am
not
I,
working.
am I here? I keep
Yes.
getting
now you
kicked
are.
off.
See you and hear you.
Okay. Sorry, carry on. I just keep talking. I didn't.
Did you see the policy up on the screen?
I
I'm not
saw
sure.
nothing. I mean, we talked about it earlier, but I saw nothing.
Yep. Okay. So let me share my screen and just for the benefit of a discussion.
I'm sorry, guys. My son's freaking out too. He's trying to study for a test and they can't. He has no internet. It's not good.
So just to recap, Lisa, in review of our involvement with the sign policy, we saw that there was inconsistencies between the banner policy and the triangle sign policy. So we developed this policy for clarity to put it all in one area so it's available for the public and the staff in one area, pointing out that, again, this idea that those signs and banners are for community events. And so we've defined that to civic, cultural, charitable, educational, public events. They're not banners and signs, are not to advertise or promote commercial products or services, or that convey a political or religious messages. And then the language at the bottom that the event being advertised must be open to all members of the public on substantially the same basis, etc. So this would just require a resolution by the town board. And Jeremy had asked a question, I don't know if you joined in. How does this compare with other policies? And I've been involved in drafting similar policies for other municipalities we represent. And in the course of doing so, we've reviewed other policies in the Hudson Valley as well, area, as well as other parts of New York State, and have done the research on the case law, and the town has the authority to regulate the limited public forum on its property in this manner as the way we've described. And the town has, as a matter of practice, done in the past.
Right, so this is not new for us per se.
It is not.
So can I just clarify here just what this says? So if, let's say the Rotary Club, right, wants to have their annual blood drive, they can put up a sign on, they can apply for a permit on the triangle to put up a sign for the Rotary Club blood drives, right? Because that's a community event.
Correct.
Now, what if there's a group that we don't like as much? Let's say it's the NRA and they want to have a blood drive. Can they put up the same sign?
They can, as long as it's not a political message associated with it. It says NRA blood drive, November 14th, 1 to 3.
Mhm.
That's permissible.
Okay.
Okay, so just need a town board vote. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
And can we, I don't know if this is a time to talk about it, but I know, and I don't even know if you guys can hear me, but okay, I've gotten, since this whole sign thing, it's just somewhat related. I've probably gotten hundreds of phone calls with people wanting to know if the town board, why are we doing this now? If the town board's going to start taking signs off private property. I've had a lot of people call me that individual residents are going on to other people's property and taking off their signs saying, well, it's a town law now. So can we clarify for residents what the rule is now?
I'd like to know, all of a sudden people are going on other people's property and taking their signs off.
And vandalizing them, drawing, like slashing them with box cutters. Yeah.
So why is anyone reporting this to the police? I mean,
Right.
They are. I'm
No, have we
encouraging
gotten
them to report it
complaints
to the police. Cameras have been
signs,
installed.
about lawn signs being stolen?
I
and
will check right now. The chief has not
because the
informed
town
me,
has taken that very seriously.
I've encouraged them to report it to the police. I know people are starting to put cameras in. They're very upset. So I
know
want to
people were
know,
very
can
upset
you,
last
Nick,
summer when
explain?
Black Lives Matter
Okay, Nick, I'm still talking. Can you not hear me?
and we took that extraordinarily seriously in the town. So, you know,
Maybe you can't hear me.
Can hear
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So I wanted to know, Nick, if you could explain what the rule is in terms of like the public right of way.
Sure. And there are two separate locations, right? Private property, that real property that is shown on your survey as being owned solely by you. So once you step across that line, you're either on your neighbor's property or you're on the public right of way. And generally the public right of way it's defined on older roads. It's less defined on modern roads. It's defined by a certain width from the center line of a road to either side of the road. The town has highway maps and the town has surveys and other things to look at when reviewing this. Generally, though, the right of way, your property boundary line does not start at the edge of the pavement. Typically, if you're looking at a modern road, because that's the easier thing, you have the center line of a road, you have the traveled way, which is a paved area. You then have grass, you may have a sidewalk, you may have curb. All of that is typically is the right of way. And then so your first 2 or 3 feet of what you think is your property is likely not your property, it's the right of way. Most people's mailboxes or driveway piers, if you will, or the apron of your driveway when you drive off of a road onto your property is the right of way. And municipalities have the right to regulate that. Through zoning is one tool. The courts have recognized that. So as far as private property, there are sign ordinances that apply to that. What we're talking about is not. We're not talking about signs on your private property. We're talking about signs within that right of way. And that should be defined by looking at your survey. And when the town goes out, they have a general sense of where it is. And when they don't, they consult with the town engineering department to figure out where that right of way is. It comes up in a variety of questions when someone says there's a tree on their property. We look to see, is it in the right of way, or is it on their property? Is it hanging over? Drainage issues that comes up. So the town is very familiar with the right of way and the property of the town staff, both the building inspector, highway, and the engineering department. The town has had on its books a law in the zoning ordinance that no signs are permitted in the town right of way. And that's been law. It's enforced in other areas. The courts have upheld it. It's constitutional as long as you're doing it on a uniform basis. And so that's the general overview. I don't know if you want to ask questions about it.
So, okay, well, first, no individual citizen should ever go on anyone's property and take anything off. If we were enforcing, that's the town issue. But so
But
if
what do you
somebody
mean that's
puts,
a town issue? If we were enforcing, that's a town issue.
meaning the town would enforce that, individual residents should not be enforcing. If you have a sign next to your mailbox, let's say, and the town has made the decision it's in the public right of way, if the town takes it away, that's one thing, but private residents should not be going onto other people's property thinking they're enforcing the town law. It's up to the town to enforce that, right? So I just want to make that clear that individual residents should not be going on thinking they're somehow deputized by the town to be enforcing this.
Correct. And I mean, we made an arrest last year when someone stole a Black Lives Matter sign off of a private property.
Right, but this is I'm wondering if this is, okay. This seems a little more politically motivated than that, but if somebody put a sign right next to their mailbox, so are we saying that's probably in the right of way because it's everyone's mailbox pretty close to the street? So is the town, are we saying the town is going to go and take those away if it's right next to like a mailbox?
The town doesn't have a policy of patrolling. The town doesn't go around looking for signs that are sticking in the right of way. If they are, though, and the town comes across it, the town views that it's clutter, it's a safety hazard, it's going to clog a drain, it's infecting with sightline, then yes, the town would remove those signs.
What if it's not doing anything? It's just next to someone's mailbox.
The town, well, but then I'd have to speak to town staff to handle that. I don't know offhand, and there is a maybe it's aesthetics, maybe it's nature of that, but signs should not be in the right of way.
All right, and the rest of the town board agrees with that?
Again, this is
Well, that's
getting
the
at
code. Yeah.
It's the code. I can't tell my code enforcement officer,
Well, it's the
not to
code
enforce.
that's never been enforced.
but it is,
It has
On
been.
people's property. It has been enforced, taking, like I think our code even allows for public, the whole impetus of this, as Jill, you said before, was private contractor signs. I think our code actually allows people to have private contractor signs in the right of way on their own property.
No, but see, Lisa, that's for clarification. You can't be both in the right of way on your own property. You're either on your own property or you're in the right of way. And the town code only allows private contractor signs and real estate signs on their own private property. You can't have those in the right of way.
Taking those away. I mean, I've never seen like our DPW standing there with people's surveys and measuring tapes and mapping out the meets and bounds of everyone's property to see if their contractor sign or their Black Lives Matter sign or whatever sign is within the public right of way or 1 inch over onto their property. I've never seen that.
I actually
And I think that's happening now. Why are we assuming that's going to happen now? The same reason why a ridiculous assumption is being made that because we are considering this, enforcing this policy, all of a sudden neighbors are stealing signs from neighbors and slashing box cutters. I mean, mayhem is befallen this community. I mean, I feel like 70s Gotham. I mean, it's preposterous. It's absolutely preposterous.
But yet it's happening.
So, Nick, I have a question. Is there any difference in the definition of right-of-way or in enforcement of this code on a state road versus a local road? Does it matter?
It does not. It's no different from when we give someone litter or we give them a permit to put a water or sewer line on a state or to cut across the state or county right-of-way. We have that authority. We have the ability to enforce zoning over property that's located within the town, regardless of the owner of that property.
Okay, but it might change like who's coming around, right? Because on a state road, the state roads department.
Well, the state could, but we have obligations to maintain state roads. We have sidewalks that are ours. So if a sign is on a state right of way, the town may well be removing that sign.
Or the state, both of them.
Or the state, yes.
the
As you know, the
Just
state,
mention this because it happens. Like on election
Yes.
day last year, I had a whole swath of signs taken off of the edge of my property by the state roads department because they can.
yes, because it's theirs. Yeah, it's their right away.
May I say that?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You're on mute.
I was saying, go ahead and finish your thought.
No, finish. Go ahead.
Oh, so I was going to say, because you've claimed that hundreds of people have called and there's a slashing of these signs and theft of these signs. I encourage anyone who's listening and anyone who wants to share this. If someone comes to your property and is wielding a blade of any kind, call the police. If you catch them, call the police. If someone steals your sign and you know who stole your sign or don't know who stole your sign on your property, call the police. Our town staff, to my knowledge, and certainly not at our behest, is not going to be going out with surveyors and measure tapes and hunting down sign offenders. That's never was the goal. Is not the goal. But to draw the conclusion now and the uproar we're seeing now, which certainly, if we want to pull up politics, I'd like, there was much worse things happening to signs for much greater important causes that happened with Black Lives Matter being burned and stolen. But if that's happening with these signs too, if people are burning them as well, by all means, make the report because we don't want that to happen. No resident before takes the law of our town into their own hands to effectuate it and to enforce it, and they shouldn't do it now. They're not going to go after you for speeding. They're not going to issue a summons for not wearing a mask, although we're addressing that going forward too. Let's have some perspective.
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't have hundreds of people calling me saying their signs are getting stolen. I have hundreds of people calling me, asking me about this law, and hundreds asking me about this. And then many people saying people are going on to their property, not hundreds. But it's not for election signs. It's other signs that are being stolen. And
The police confirmed to me that one incident was reported to them of a form-based sign.
The point is
I've encouraged everyone to report it. I'm not reporting it for them.
And the other thing is that the town staff has to remove signs regardless of the content of it. We did have a point where staff was removing just contractor signs and not the political signs, and we instructed that they can't do that, and that even though there's the contractor signs are up and there's a war between two particular contractors. If you're removing signs from a particular intersection, all signs have to come down. You ought to be content neutral with respect to what signs are being removed. And so we've had that discussion with town staff to inform of that policy.
Yep. And then just to confirm, with our change to the triangle with the civic engagement, we still can't put, using my example before, You can't put, if there's a civic engagement sign that can go up on the triangle sign, that sign cannot be in other public areas of town. So in other words, like Chappaqua School Foundation, they could put something up on the triangle sign, but they can't put up a sign in public property.
They would be treated like if they were to put up a lawn sign, that would not be allowed either. That's correct.
Okay.
They may put it up on school property. That would be the school district's determination.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about that.
Okay. There are some administrative items. Are there any issues, questions about those? Payment of claim, adoption of minutes.
Sorry, do we just want to go over the mask issue real quick?
Sure.
Sorry, Nick, I know you just turned off from signs, but I'm gonna make you come back for mask.
Yep.
So, you know, obviously there was the welcome news today that the CDC has adjusted its mask wearing requirements to allow that folks who are fully vaccinated, so, you know, 2 weeks after their second shot or their first shot of J&J, that they are no longer required to wear masks when they are outdoors and with other fully vaccinated people. And the state, in its sort of, in a welcome turn of events, immediately went forward with an announcement that they intended to uphold the CDC regulations and to follow the same guidance. And so the question then becomes, we have a local mask ordinance that we are incredibly proud of being the first in the state. They're not the only ones in the state now who have such an ordinance that allows our police department to enforce mask wearing consistent with the executive orders that New York State has promulgated. And so the question then becomes, how can we adjust our local ordinance in order to come into compliance with the changes that were announced today?
Certainly. So the state's announcement today does require the wearing of a mask outside in certain crowded events and venues. So there would still be some limited circumstances of those who have been vaccinated to wear so. And we're waiting for the actual guidance to come out from the governor, but we have a good understanding of what it will be. So the town in July of 2020 adopted the law Ivy referenced, and we've issued local declarations because that law is only in effect when there's a local state of emergency in effect. So the local law was also drafted to be forward thinking that it might be needed in the future for any type of a communicable disease. And local governments have that ability to enact it. It's being upheld by the Supreme Court going over 100 years ago. So the local law serves a purpose in the future as well. So, but the town's options are to adopt a local law to amend Chapter 86 to be consistent with what the governor has now announced, end enforcement of it by not renewing the local or state emergency, or repeal the local law. We would note that even if the state of emergency is rescinded and the local law therefore is not triggered and not in effect because it's only in effect when there's a local state of emergency, the New York State public health law allows the police to enforce the governor's and the state's mask requirements and the guidance that has been issued. So the police will still have the ability to enforce. You may recall that the town was the first in the state to do so because the state was going back and forth and it was a little bit of unclear. The town added clarity to its police force. So those are the three options: repeal the local law, end enforcement by not renewing the local state of emergency or rescinding it, or adopt a local law to amend the law.
And I think for the reasons that you discussed, it makes sense to keep the local law on the books. And so with that in mind, the sort of recommended approach as we discussed prior to this meeting would be for us to sunset the local state of emergency. So I will look to you to work with me to put together the appropriate documentation that will allow me to effectively end our local state of emergency, keeping in mind that, you know, should there be additional variants and an increase, you know, we were low last summer too. So, you know, we're all hoping that the variants don't lead to, you know, and that the vaccines do work and that we get the vaccines. But, you know, in the event that we need to go back to a state of emergency, that we have the local law available to us in the future.
That's correct. So no town board action would be required, just a declaration from the supervisor modifying or rescinding, likely in this case, rescinding the state of emergency, local state of emergency. Okay, we'll work with you on that.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm sorry. And then there are the just couple of administrative items. Anyone have any questions about them?
I actually had some changes to the April 23rd minutes, but I haven't finished with them yet. I couldn't get to it all. Can we just postpone that one set of minutes?
Sure,
And Christina,
and-
I guess, or Lauren, I'll send them to you.
that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready to go into the town board meeting then?
I think so.
Okay. Can we get a motion to close the work session and open up the town board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the town board meeting for Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. As I have in weeks past, I will hold my supervisor's report and it will come out in tomorrow's e-newsletter. Jill, do you have anything for the administrator's report?
Just very quickly that the county taxes are due this Friday, April 30th. There is a drop box in the lobby of Town Hall right outside the police station. It's available 24/7 for anyone to just take and drop it off. Otherwise, the tax office will be their regular business hours, and they're there from 7 to 7. So they actually will have somebody in the lobby for most of the day on Friday to be able to assist people coming in and actually stamp their receipts. Christina, did I get that right? Oh, and if you're mailing your tax payment for whatever reason, please make sure that you actually see the post office affix a postmark to the envelope. That is your proof of timely mailing, not when we receive it, but actually when it's postmarked. Okay.
Yes, and I'd like to, if you don't mind, some people choose to go to the post office versus our drop box. For some reason, I think they perceive that as being more secure or something. I just want to underline that our drop box is locked. Only myself and the deputy have the key. It's in front of the police desk and it's under camera. So I would urge people to use a drop box versus a post office. We find it much more reliable. But as the administrator said, if you choose to, you certainly can choose to mail it. But please, please, please see the postmark, because we do have a lot of every collection, there's someone that said that I mailed it on time and this and that, and we get it back and it doesn't have a timely postmark. I'm not saying they didn't happen, but something happened to the letter where it doesn't get to us in time, it doesn't have the postmark, and unfortunately people have to pay the penalty. So we don't like that.
Okay, thanks, Jill, and thanks, Christina. So we've now come to the portion of our meeting that is dedicated to public comment and new business. If anyone would like to make a public comment who's with us on the Zoom, feel free to raise your digital hand. And while we wait on that, I'll ask Christina whether anything came in over email for tonight's meeting.
No, nothing for tonight's meeting.
Great. And Pam, I see that we do have a couple of people with their hands up, so if we can bring them into the meeting.
Yes. Rob Fleischer, please unmute yourself.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm going to turn back to the topics of the working session. Is that okay? On the sign language that you would put up on the board, is that an acceptable topic to talk about now?
Every topic is acceptable during public comments. Yep.
I'm just checking. Just want to make sure. So and I didn't see the whole conversation. I saw bits and pieces of it. But just so I understand, is the idea now that the only signs that will go up on public property must be on the two signs, one that is at the top of the triangle at the entrance to the Chapco Hamlet, and the other that's at the front of the corner of the Millwood Plaza signboard. Those are the only two places we're talking about where signs would go on public property. Is that correct understanding? No? I see Joe shaking no, so
There are the banners that are on the light, the lamp
Okay.
posts, as well as any banner that has been hung up historically, like I guess on the fence of Rec Field. Jill, correct me if I'm wrong.
Right, right.
What's-
As you enter the train station, usually there's a farmer's market.
That
Yeah.
policy just pertains to the banners and the two triangle signs. That's it.
But, well, I think, Rob, but it's not all public signs. I just want to clarify. I don't know if you were asking about all public signs or just signs for like civic events can go in those areas. Signs, but public signs, like just from anything else, can't go anywhere.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question again. I'm not talking about the banners. I'm talking about any kind of sign. If you're going to put up a sign on public property, okay, my sense from listening to it was that it needed to go in one of those prefabricated that we have this, you put in the little wood slots, and that's where the signs would go. Is there any other place, any other public property where you could apply by permit or anything where you would put up a sign? My understanding from listening to the session was no. Did I miss something?
No sign, nobody's answering, but what the,
I actually,
no signs can go on any public property, apparently, other than if you want to put up a sign that said Lisa is awesome, you cannot put that anywhere on public property because it's not a civic sign. But if you want to advertise for the farmer's market could pay to put up get paid to put a sign in those slots. But the farmer's market could not put up a sign anywhere else. And, there are no like political signs, no Chappaqua school foundation signs. Those can't go anywhere else on public property.
okay, but
They can put up a banner, Nick, correct?
And no like Black Lives Matter signs, for instance, those cannot be on the triangle.
No stop the steal, no pro NRA, no pro choice, no.
Correct. Correct.
Absolutely not. Okay. And so Nick, do I have it correct? So I'm looking, I know you hate when I talk to you, but I'm looking to get your perspective on this. Did I
Well,
understand?
I'm not familiar with all the locations where the town might have signs, so I'm not going to answer that question because I'm not in possession of those facts. However, with respect to the banners and the triangle signs, we've stated what that policy is.
Right, and that would be electronic sign as well, Ralph.
Right.
Right. So I'm not going to give you a laundry list because I'm not here to be grilled by you as to where signs are.
I understand that. I'm just trying to repeat what I thought I heard and make sure, because everybody says, oh, that's what we said, but I'm just trying to repeat it back and make sure.
Fair enough. So the only signs I dealt with were the banners and the two triangle signs.
Okay.
I'm not speaking about any other sign
Okay.
location.
Is there anybody else who thinks that there's any other place where you can put signs?
Rob, I think if you have specific questions, maybe you should address them to the town board or send them to public comment.
Okay. So I guess that Ivy, I'll ask you, is there anything else, other place?
Rob, I'm going to ask you to send these comments to us to townboard@mynewcastle.com
Okay.
or to public comment, please. Okay.
The other question is then on the right of way. Okay. When I drive down from town to my house on Douglas, every single sign of some are political, some are not political, are all in the right of way. Every single one that I see. The one up on my cul-de-sac, every single one is in the right of way. How do we have selective enforcement on that area of public property? And well, we don't enforce on that area of public property, and yet we do on the triangles. Or is that
Well,
allowed?
I don't agree with your premise of your statement that it's selective enforcement. So the town has the right to use its enforcement discretions. The town does not patrol looking for signs. The town has a zoning ordinance that says no signs in the right of way. It's been there for a number of years, decades, and like I suspect, a number of years, and like other municipalities, it has the ability to enforce it.
Okay. That sounds like we're choosing to enforce it in one area, or it's all public property. That we're choosing to enforce it in some public property, but not other public property. And I'm not talking to you, Nick, but I'm speaking. You can all react to it as well if you want. That's what I'm hearing. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it. I look at it, it's all public property. Some public property we're going to enforce the code on. Some public property we're not going to enforce the code on. But
You know what, Rob, there is speeding all through town. I'm not going to say that the police selectively enforce speeding, but when they happen to come across it, they stop someone from speeding, but they can't be every place all the time. So when my building inspectors are out and about, when DPW is out and about and they see something and their time allows, they will take and they will correct it. They will pick up the signs. But I'm not going to stop paving roads. I'm not going to stop clearing out drains and put everybody on sign patrol. I just can't do that. And that doesn't make it selective enforcement.
Okay. Jill, I hear what you're saying. I appreciate all the work that the DPW does, but if you go through the entire town, almost every sign that I see seems to be on the public right of way.
And we will be correcting that.
Okay.
People should move them. Then they should be moved. I don't know. We're kind of being circular here. They should move them. I think Nick has been pretty clear. So then people should move them.
Okay. Good enough. I understand that much clearer. Thank you very much. And enjoy the rest of your night.
Okay. C. Manasharian, please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Cynthia Manachurian. I have a couple of different points I'd like to bring up. I want to thank you for your attention and work with regard to the New York State DEC Hudson River Estuary Program. From what I understand in the conversation that you just had in your work session, the focus is going to be on the Hudson Estuary and grant money to figure out inventory having to do with impacts on the Hudson Estuary. Somebody suggested, it sounded like maybe it's a broader scope, but I think that's a great idea to pick up with focus on environmental impacts around the Hudson Estuary in the Newcastle zone, which is exactly my zone. And I wanted to recommend that maybe you'd like to go into some sort of partnership with T-Town Reservation, because they're all about doing that kind of inventory and they might be very helpful to you. Not to mention other locals who know every square inch of this area and could be very helpful to your environmental specialist. So thank you for that work. I wanted to thank you for reestablishing the Millwood West End Committee. And thank you, Lisa Katz, for focusing on that. I'm just curious, I haven't seen names yet for who will be on that committee, or have you not quite figured that out?
It's on for tonight, shortly.
It's in the actual names are in,
They're,
or you
they're-
haven't picked names, you're just
No,
reestablishing?
no. We're going to announce them tonight.
Oh, you're
It's on our resolution.
announcing.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. I look forward to that committee getting going. I wanted to thank you for your Newcastle Town resolution with regard to Arbor Day. I like everything that's in the resolution. I have one minor comment where it says, whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and renewal. Absolutely, but it might be good to suggest, because you're inviting people to plant trees, you know, for all the right positive reasons, but it might be good to insert indigenous if it's about the sustainability and creating local habitat and local food sources for local animals, you know, birds and insects and so forth, locally feed on local indigenous plant sources. And when too many plants come from other environments, it actually crowds out the ability for local wildlife to eat and to find what they need to support themselves. So just a notion to support local planting for protection of local habitat. But I love that you're doing the Arbor Day statement. Then I wanted to move on to just drawing your attention to the Hudson Ridge Wellness Center, which is at the other end of my block. And I wanted to let you know they're in full gear again with the planning board of Cortland. And the community is up in arms about that project, but it's very Cortland based, even though there are several aspects to that project that absolutely will impact the west end of Newcastle and Ossining as well. And they have another meeting tomorrow. I attended, they did a special meeting on April 22nd, only for this one project. And tomorrow's meeting, it'll be part of their regular agenda of other issues for the planning board. I asked them if they've been in touch with their neighbors, meaning you and Ossining, and they all looked at each other and said, have you? Oh, have you? And they weren't even sure if now that they're up and running again with this project and the public review process, that they've adequately informed their neighbors, their government partner neighbors. So I would be very appreciative if Sabrina and Newcastle jumped right in. Another meeting tomorrow. And I'd like you all to have some oversight over what's going on with their assessment of their project. For starters, Newcastle approved Sunshine Home and went through a whole traffic study, and those numbers are now on the books. The traffic study that this other project created, they did originally before Sunshine numbers, and they were going to use the same roads. And I would like Newcastle to insist that the review include the numbers that have already been improved for our same roads. A primary artery is Glendale, which is essentially all Newcastle. Primary artery for the Hudson Ridge. They also are going to impact with their drainage, the Croton River, and that is part of what you're going to do with the DEC in your assessments of the Hudson Estuary. The Croton River dumps into the Hudson Estuary. The water that is coming off of their project will come towards Glendale Road, will also come towards the Indian Brook Reservoir watershed, which comes across Glendale Road and Newcastle. So all of this stuff, I think we should jump into as the neighboring community. I think even in terms of mutual aid, people were asking them, have you done proper accounting for the number of ambulance visits that you'll need, the number of fire, the number of police, and it didn't seem like they're there yet with trying to figure that out in their own budget. And so they need to be aware that these services are already, for this community, it's hard to get in and out during storms, etc., and kind of, claimed. So there has to be, from a mutual aid standpoint, some real clarity. Again, they're going to be on well water, and where's the water going to come from for the fire department? How many Newcastle fire trucks would need to be dispatched, as well as Cortland, as well as Ossining? All these things I think need an intermunicipal review, and I would really appreciate you all jumping in and also asking what they plan on doing with their Newcastle parcel. They claim nothing. It would be fabulous, given the work that you're all doing, that they not request to expand onto their Newcastle parcel, which is like 20 acres, and maybe make it open space for Newcastle and for the community, because it does lend itself in terms of the greater Teton area to something like that, dedicated open space. So those are my thoughts for today. And do you think it would be possible to, or do you know if they've reached out to you about this project? in a while. They put a
I know-
moratorium on it for a long time.
Yeah, I actually don't know if they've reached out, and Jill's shaking her head no too. So, you know, if they have reached out, as you sort of appropriately said, they would have reached out through Sabrina. And so we can follow up with her after this meeting and just go over some of the items that you listed.
Thank
and
you.
Make sure that she's in touch with the town of Cortland with regard to that.
Thank you so much.
Just a quick comment. I heard you rustling papers. Can you email us those questions, some of the things you highlighted, just so we
My pretty colors and I'll type it up and I can send it to you. I don't know that I can get it to you before tomorrow's meeting. I don't know if you even would attempt to reach out to them before tomorrow's meeting. And I don't know how many more public meetings. Tomorrow will be their, at least their third, if not their fourth. They suddenly, you know, they went from on hiatus for a couple of years to a lot of meetings. So I don't know how many more public meetings they'll have. But I'll try to get it to you this week.
Okay. And also my plug, you should consider joining the Millwood West End Advisory Board.
I don't think you want me. I don't think that many people like me, I have to say. So I do what I can, but you know. But thank you very much for your encouragement. I appreciate the vote of confidence.
I do think there are a couple of initiatives underway that do apply to the watershed in your area, like more than one. In addition to the natural resources inventory, there's the waterlay district that applies to the wetlands in that space as well. There's a couple of things going on that might be of interest to you. So definitely email your comments and we'll try and keep you in the loop on those things. And then the other point that might be of interest to you is that the Conservation Board is hoping to review the trees policy for the town so that it can be more inclusive of native species and
Yes.
more guidance around desirable native species of trees.
As some of the town board members already know, I'm all about that. Very excited. Thank you so much.
Margaret Ferguson, please unmute yourself.
Good evening. I'm going to make a point about sign vandalism. The laughter and the mockery of your fellow board member, Lisa Katz, was really inappropriate when she brought up about the vandalism. I have been talking to the police about signs being stolen from public property and from private property before this weekend. They told me that only the homeowners could report a private property theft. In one instance, I brought in 2 signs that one had been slashed with a box cutter in half and vandalized with X-rated graffiti. The other one had been cut and also vandalized with X-rated graffiti. They spoke with the homeowner and she filed a police report. But I explained to them what had been going on for a while, and they told me that I wasn't complaining about the public property, I was complaining about private thefts. And they said only homeowners can make those reports. That goes back about 2 weeks, maybe more. A lot of homeowners say they don't want to do it. They don't want to get involved. This weekend on Sunday, between 12:30 in the afternoon and 1:30, somebody came to my house and cut a sign that had been triple wired to a shepherd's garden hook, ripped it in half and threw it in my driveway in broad daylight. At 6:30, my husband and I were standing in our driveway and the car came to a stop at the end of our driveway. A man saw us, rather than drive away, rolled down his window, pointed vehemently and angrily at the sign that we'd put back up on the shepherd's hook and gave us the finger and drove off. I filed 2 police reports this weekend. These are very serious incidents over a not-for-profit group, Residents United to Save Chapaka Hamlet, that is doing something allowed for under New York state law, following the seeker process and moving towards an Article 78. That is the process. And that's all we are doing. We are 100% resident funded, performed. We get no salary. All donated time, all donated efforts. It's extremely serious what's going on in this community. There is a lot of animosity directed towards us for no good reason. And I see you laughing, Ivy, and that's inappropriate.
I assure you, I would not laugh at you.
Well, then I don't know what I just saw.
I don't know what you just saw either.
I just like to comment that certainly no one should be doing anything to anybody's personal property, but the assumption that because of this this policy enforcement and a policy that again has been around and a policy that's through other communities is not the reason why someone is doing a terrible thing. Just as someone would do a terrible thing elsewhere, they shouldn't be doing it to your property, anyone's property. But to make the leap that people are coming with box cutters and destroying these signs because of our policy enforcement is a leap that is just an unreasonable leap. And
Jeremy, did I link this to your policy and what I just said?
I'm sorry, and I'm sorry that you feel that people have such animus towards you, but I would encourage you to see the animus that's been towards some of us on the town board throughout this process. So certainly,
And
I
right
hope
now,
no one calls you corrupt or anything like that, or tells you selfish or curses at you, because that's something that would be very unfortunate, and unfortunately some members of the town board. And in terms of how your not-for-profit spends its money, you have every right to voice. You have every right to, I would assume, I don't know if you're funding a campaign, I don't know if you're just buying signs, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you do, you have every right to do within the four corners of the law, and no one should fault you for it at all. Zero.
Okay, let's go back to a very concerning 2 incidents that happened this weekend. And Ivy, the reason I made a comment to you, because you were smiling, whether you realize it or not, you were smiling when I said that. And you can go back and watch the tape. I would not have said what I just said had I not seen you
I'm
smiling.
really tired of people picking apart everything that I do, every facial expression that I make. It's absurd. I'm not laughing at you. I'm taking you seriously. Have you reported this to the police?
Yes, I just said I filed 2 police reports on Sunday.
Well, then I expect our force to be following up on that, and I will follow up with the chief tomorrow and make sure that it's getting done.
And one of the officers said to me, in his words, "This is really getting out of hand, not us." And another one said, "A lot of people are upset around here about people just voicing their opinions, and it's got to stop." These are our police officers who couldn't have been more supportive, and I appreciate them.
And I appreciate them too. And I'm glad to hear that they handled it appropriately. That is the appropriate response.
And all you said, Jeremy, has nothing to do with the incidents I just reflected on. That's it. If you had 2 brazen episodes in broad daylight, you would be very concerned too.
100%. And I'm glad you reported to the police, and you should report it to the police.
And I reported it within minutes.
Okay. And as well, you should 100%. I would never, I'm not asserting otherwise, not asserting otherwise.
And when I found those defaced and cut apart, box cuttered apart signs, I brought them in. I took them away from the lady's home because I didn't want her to see them until I explained what had happened. And I took them promptly to the police, and I spoke with Officer Ramirez about it. I'm doing everything I can to make clear what's going on in this community in terms of vandalism on private property, and it is happening. 5 signs I put out, 5 signs were taken between Friday and Sunday that I personally placed on people's yards at their request. If DPW crews are going out on Friday and Saturday, I'm very surprised, but that's what happened. That's just my personal experience.
I mean, whether it's, I would say, maybe the majority of people don't support what you're doing. I don't know, but either way, they certainly shouldn't be doing that. And I'm glad you reported it. You have every right to put where you should put it. I think we're going in circles here. Report it to the police, whether it's a NRA sign, a Black Lives Matter sign,
Please.
A pro-choice sign, a form-based code sign. I completely agree with you. It shouldn't be taken, but no one's disputing that.
Please, this is a community group. This is a community group staffed 100% by your fellow residents. These are people who live here, including me. Thank you.
More? Thank you. I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Sid Falkson, please unmute yourself.
Hi, this actually is Dana Gorelick. I used Sid's link, so this is not Sid. I have a question about the signs as well. I was curious how many complaints the town received regarding yard signs, if that's been quantified.
I don't have an answer to that.
Go ahead.
I don't have an answer. I don't think it's been quantified how many complaints the town has received with regard to signs.
I
seen
have
4
received
complaints.
I'm sorry, Lisa. So four complaints since April. I'm in the midst of answering a FOIL request that asked something similar. I'm
Okay.
sifting through 535 emails. Some of them, so I doing my due diligence and be forwarding that to council so they can take and review it.
And the assumption is, and that's where the FOIL is not going to be that helpful, is that everyone who makes a complaint is doing so via email. So, I've gotten complaints, people have said it to me personally, so I don't know about the other board members, how many they've received, but so it's not just quantifying in an email, it's quantifying it through other means, but we were happy to
Okay.
share what.
Yep.
So I don't, yeah, you referenced the FOIL request. I have no idea what would have been in that or not in that. I have I didn't know that. But so just to clarify, there were 4 complaints that were via email. And how many more is that than a normal election cycle?
No, the issue isn't, how many complaints came in over email versus came in over text message versus were people that stopped Jeremy on the street, were people who, called into town hall to raise complaints and so on and so forth. The town has not done anything different. The town is simply enforcing a policy that has been on the books for decades.
Right, differently than it historically has. My next question is for Lori. Lori, I was curious whether you support removing signs on town property, and if so, why? And then if you support enforcing non-compliant signs on personal property.
I support the enforcement of our local laws.
So yes, so that's yes, you do support removing signs on.
I'm curious. It seemed inappropriate asking Lori specifically.
This is not the opportunity
Ask us
to
all.
cross-examine
Ask us
individual
specifically.
town board members. You're here to offer public comment to the entirety of the town board. If you're trying to make some kind of political statement because Lori Morton is running for office and you want to put her on the record, you can go to the League of Women Voters debate in a couple of weeks and do so. You're addressing the entire town board here.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. I heard, wow, I'm actually really trying not to be, I'm not being confrontational, so.
That seems extremely confrontational to address a question to only one town board member.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
No,
My last
it's not how
question.
I feel, it's how it is.
What was the purpose, may I ask, what was the purpose of asking solely Lori Morton? If you want to ask the question, why
Because
only Lori?
I'm curious what her opinion is on it.
Only Lori? You don't want to know anybody else's opinion?
Sure, I'd love all, actually, yeah, sure. If you all want to go around and say your opinions, I would be very interested, yes.
I don't. Go on, what's your next question?
My last question, I heard someone, I can't recall if it was Jeremy or Nick, and I'm not trying to single anybody out, but I heard, and I want to make sure I heard this correctly. So easements are not private property, right? The easement is considered town property. And I'm just curious how strictly this is going to be enforced. So someone said, oh, we're not going to be going around surveying. How would one know where on their own property it is safe to put a sign? Because it was also said that they will be correcting signs that are not correctly placed. So how would one know that so that they can be compliant with the law?
One would have to look at their own property survey.
Okay.
And what was the question about easements, Nick? Can you?
Yeah, well, so I don't understand the question about easements. I don't recall we mentioned.
No, I thought I was clarifying what I thought I heard. So maybe the answer is that was not my what I heard was not correct.
Yeah, no, I
So
didn't.
I thought I heard someone say that an easement isn't private property. I thought it was you, Jeremy, but I don't want to single anyone out. I'm not sure who said it. I thought I heard it. I'm just asking.
I don't recall if I did.
I don't recall that.
I don't see anything about easements.
An easement is an interest in property, whether it be an easement over public property or an easement over private property. So it really doesn't appear to be appropriate in context.
Okay, so we need to look at our surveys, see, would an easement be on a survey? Oh, I'm sorry, I meant right away, not easement. I apologize. Maybe that was the confusion. So we need to figure out where the right of way ends and place signs behind there. Is that correct?
The right of way, correct, the right of way ends.
Not to
where the
cross-examine
property's-
anyone. I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
The right of way ends where the property's boundary line begins, as would be shown on the property survey, yes.
The right of- Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Roger Klepper, please unmute yourself.
Oh, hi, that worked. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Hi, Roger.
Hi, everybody. Hi, town board people. I'm not sure. I might have missed the intro. Is it okay to ask about the form-based code questions that were discussed on the Friday working group session? Is that
Public comment, anything goes.
okay? Fantastic. So, well, first of all, that session was very helpful, actually. And the one aspect, it was kind of interesting, and I think Sabrina had suggested this, or it was a recommendation related to property boundaries. If properties are combined, anything exceeding a half acre, at which point, and I think this is lost on a lot of people, because I think a lot of people get caught up in so much related to form-based code that they don't really fully understand what's at its core. And at its core, it's an issue of kind of discretion, on the part of various town entities, and a code replacing that discretion. So I thought it was interesting, and I think that really came through in that meeting. And and I guess in that proposal, I'm not sure if everyone heard it, but I mean, everyone on the town board clearly heard it. But in the case where you go above a half acre, and I guess it was, maybe combining properties, and then people suggested, okay, maybe even if it's not combining properties, anything above a half acre, you basically give, the planning board discretion, right? Which is, in many ways runs counter to the form-based code. So my first question is, can the planning board, having discretion, can that coexist with a form-based code? So, it seems to kind of run counter with that. So it seemed like that was the, one of the recommendations for consideration. And I guess my second question is why, why does the size of the plot matter? If you think it makes sense for the planning board to have discretion, why don't you would allow, and the form-based code can exist, or some version that makes our process easier, which really is the goal here, then why can't you have planning board discretion? I mean, implicit is that bad things can only happen, on larger parcels. But developers are very creative people. They can make bad things happen on a 0.48 acre parcel or other things, and they will. When they see a code on the other side of them, they're going to figure out how to do things. And the other thing that was mentioned quite a bit on Friday was the notion of a checklist. So the end result of all of this, and I don't know if a lot of people realize this, is that the only thing standing between the developer and what ultimately happens is a checklist. There is no discretion on the part of the town. So, I mean, I think I've asked a few questions there, but I'm really interested in that topic, and whether, to what extent, you really can insert much more planning board discretion, which really at the end of the day protects our town, with developers on the other side.
So I'll answer part of that, and there was a lot in there to unpack. But one of the issues that was raised by many people is that there's a concern about planning board involvement, and there wouldn't be more planning board involvement if they didn't have any discretion or ability to make sure that the code was properly enforced. So that's why it's potentially being added back in there in certain circumstances. I think the whole idea that we still have town staff, even if it's not the planning board, there's still oversight. It's not just a free pass to do whatever you want. but the voices of some people in the community were concerned about outside developers that were going to come in and buy all these plots up, because that is what in fact the max build out assumes. To get to that max build out, let's assume that the town residents didn't exercise their right, and all the land was leased, the public land was leased, you would have to aggregate these lots. So in that situation, if that happened and there was that degree of aggregation, whether it's just on North Greeley, because that's only what we're doing now, is that then you would have another piece or another layer in there. However, when it's a smaller lot, the likelihood of use the term developer coming in to buy a 0.1 acre lot or a 0.2 acre lot is probably not very likely, because they can't do much with that property. And as Sabrina said, the Village Yard, one of the issues they have, and I don't quote me please, but I think it was 0.38 acres, is that they can't develop or really build that because they can't accommodate the right parking and circulation of traffic. So a lot that size is extremely difficult to build much more than what they have now. So we have safety built in, but in the event that lots are aggregated together to such a size that where there's a concern of this big developer coming in, then we know we can put the planning board involvement back in. And my understanding is it's not just a waste of time to do so. We would give them more ability and oversight. I don't remember, I'm sorry, Roger, what else you asked, but that was just addressing that particular issue. I apologize.
I mean, I guess my question is why wouldn't you do it with this? I mean, you mentioned, the Village Yard. I think, it seems like you're putting a lot of faith in the code. I mean, how many times have you seen people propose things at less than a half acre that, that would have been objectionable to the town? Well,
the idea would be, Roger, that we're building a lot of that in now in advance. And then my response is, how many times have you seen anything proposed or gone anywhere in the hamlet of Chappaqua in the past 20 years? At least in my time here, I use church as an example. It's been vacant and nothing's been there. It's just been a vacant building. So and Rite Aid hasn't done much. So the point being is, creating some fear that is not a reasonable fear. I understand the worst case scenario is you always keep that out there. Maybe it's going to happen. That's not. It may happen. It may happen. But I just don't see it as much of an issue. And we're building in up front those answers or those remedies so that we can control the process.
But isn't the right answer to that, Jeremy, better governance? I mean, if our process is so bad, and I hear 91 Bedford, took 3 years, and I hear that a number of times, and but it seems like you jump to a form-based code. You jump to, it's basically someone who can't diet, can't exercise, and can't eat right. The answer is wiring their jaw shut, right? To prevent them from, because they can't exercise any discipline. I mean, isn't the answer to that, a better process, or at least wouldn't you explore that first? And then if really, I mean, are we so inept that we can't do what other towns can do to make the process better? I mean, why are we so uniquely incapable of doing that? So that the answer is to just completely, turn it into a checklist, as if, a developer's applying for a parking permit. They do all of these things and then they get a green light. It seems like it's our town. I mean, these analogies aren't pretty, but our town kind of, becomes kind of a beached whale that developers, pulls us out of the loop and makes us very, very vulnerable to whatever as long as they follow the checklist. And I understand how that's beneficial to a property owner. I understand how that's beneficial to a developer. But what I have a hard time reconciling is the exposure that it puts our town in. And I was encouraged when, just the explanation from on Friday, but the idea of layering in discretion, which also gives you the ability to negotiate. Like if there had been a checklist in Chappaqua Crossing, right? Would we have gotten 33 affordable housing units? Would we have gotten Chapac? would we have gotten the shuttle? There's something that discretion leads to your ability to negotiate. A checklist, kind of compromises that completely. What I heard was,
So-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to respond to that. I'm happy to discuss with you more later because we're taking it up.
I
But
think
to
we
that,
need to move this
the
forward.
Chapel Crossing
I think we've
point,
understood the main
just-
point here, and I think maybe the two of you can have an offline conversation.
just quickly, very quickly, to that point, just Chapel Crossing is it's a huge, much bigger piece of land and much more going on a 0.1 or 0.2 acre plot. And number two, one of the beauties of our public property, should that ever be leased or sold, we absolutely control everything as a community, because nothing can happen ultimately if there is that permissive referendum, and we could dictate things and have those chips in our hand when that time comes. But Roger, I'll talk more with you. We can certainly chat more.
And Roger, I'm happy to talk to you too. And despite your weird analogies, go through your reasoning with you. I happen to agree with you.
Okay. All right. I'll leave the beach whale and the wire jaw aside for any future conversation. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Roger.
Phil Loria, please unmute yourself. Phil Laura, you can unmute yourself.
No, Phil disappeared.
We lost Phil.
Okay,
Probably on my internet line.
and Warren Gottlieb, please unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I just had a quick, completely unrelated question. Just wanted to know, has the town started looking at making plans for a return, even if it's in a limited way, like the school board has been doing for quite some time, of having limited in-person attendance back at town hall for board meetings? And, I know there's it may not be possible at town hall, which I completely understand. But maybe, chat pack or and that's a similar size. Has there been any plan along those lines, and what's the timetable for that?
So yes, there have been discussions along those lines. You're correct that town hall can't accommodate our meetings. So
Right.
I'm looking right now, we have 30 participants on the call right now, on the Zoom right now, in addition to anybody who might be watching us on YouTube. We had more than that earlier in the evening. And unfortunately, Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our assembly room with COVID restrictions and distancing and so on only allows for 18. Is that right? So we don't think we'd be able to get away with using town hall, because we wouldn't want people, sort of waiting out in the wings or what have you. But yes, chat pack is the option that we're looking at. There are a couple of challenges to make that happen from a sort of setup perspective. So needing to make sure that what we'd want to be able to do there is to be able to simultaneously maintain the Zoom capability for people who would not feel comfortable coming to chat pack and being in person there. So there's some things we have to do from a sort of AV and technology perspective in order to make that happen. And Jill, where are we at with that?
We're working on it.
We just started talking about it. They just upped the indoor
capacity
it
limits.
was like the capacity limit at the beginning of April, and we've gone out and done a tour and met with NCCMC to move it forward. We're eager to make it happen. And we did say that we were going to try. Remember, now it's all coming back to me. We said we were going to try at the very least to make sure that our next community engagement sessions around the form-based code were in that we were able to offer at least one that would be in person.
Right, and that's
what it is.
Okay, so this is is this something in weeks, or are we talking months? I don't mean to be pushy about it. I'm just months, really. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I don't see anyone else with their hand raised at this time.
All right, great. Let's go ahead and move forward. Now I have to pull back up my agenda. So the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda for this evening. And before we move forward with that, we discussed pulling off item 15, which was the public hearing on the Verizon cable franchise, to introduce that separately as a resolution. Was there anything else that any of the town board members
Right.
wanted to move?
The adoption of the minutes for the 23rd, we're going to
correct. Yeah.
table those.
Right.
Great.
And then wouldn't we want to like read the proclamations out loud?
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
I feel like those shouldn't be in there, the Arbor Day and the Asian American Pacific Islander Proclamation.
Do we have those in the packet?
Circulate to those now.
What's that?
I can circulate those to you now.
Okay. Oh boy. Sorry, so I'm tired and I didn't eat dinner, so I'm like a little lightheaded as I'm trying to flip between all my screens. Were we ready to move forward with the other items on the consent agenda? What are we?
Yes, you are.
So items 10, 11, and 15 are being removed from the consent agenda.
So I move to approve the consent agenda submitted consisting of the authorization to appoint Kent Thomas and Owen Platt to the Climate Smart Communities Task Force. Authorization to accept retirement at the DPW, authorization to post a position at the DPW, authorization to hire 2 seasonal laborers at the DPW. Similarly, authorization to hire summer interns 2 at the MWTP. We are withholding number 6. Number 7, resolution authorizing acceptance of maintenance bond at Birdhoff. Number 8, resolution authorizing acceptance of cash bond, 6 Cynthia Court. Number 9, resolution accepting cash performance bond. Number 10, that's being held off. Number 11, that's being held off. Number 12, authorization to renew open government contract for this year. 13, authorization, 13, authorization to use town property, Chamber of Commerce. 14, authorization to use town property, Discovery Chappaqua, and we are holding on that.
So Jeremy, for number
Yes.
6, April 20th, I didn't think was in dispute. It was April 23rd.
Third that we were holding.
Correct.
So
Oh, that'd be wrong. My apologies. So adoption of minutes for the 20th of this year.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $1,536,252.80 listed in the summary pre-check writing report and detail voucher detail report, both dated April 23rd of this year. 8 checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, April 28th, 2021.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Whoever's next.
I move to set a public hearing on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021 at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as practicable with regard to the matter of solicitation of comments on Verizon's cable franchise performance and community needs.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the appointment of the following individuals to the Millwood West End Advisory Board for a term to be as long as necessary to fulfill its function on advising on various improvements to Millwood, both on the short-term and long-term basis, effective May 1st, 2021. Judith Carlin, Michael DePrino, Stuart Faust. I'm really apologizing if I mispronounce your name. Kalyani Narashahan, Nicole Reish, Leslie Smith, and Michael Weinberg.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Lisa, you want to go?
Sure. I move to award the request for proposals for the proposed decommissioning of Upper Mingle Dam to Tectonic Engineering Consultants in Mountainville, New York, to prepare tasks 1 to 7 as indicated in the fee proposal in the amount of $544,470, with the overall capital project totaling $1,650,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move to award the request for proposals for graphic design services to Nikki Jones Agency, Inc. in Port Jervis, New York, at the rates indicated on the proposal dated March 22nd, 2021.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. I move to award bids for each individual item to the lowest responsible bidders in each item under the DPW 2021-01 water maintenance materials bid. This is a service and materials requirement bid for fixed itemized prices for a 1-year period as per the attached spreadsheet.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move to accept the proposal for filter media removal by contracted vacuum truck services to Adler Industrial Services in Newark, New Jersey for the total estimated cost of $10,800, which includes 2 days of equipment and labor.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to approve ELQ change order number 40 in the amount of $995,329.43 to include the items listed on the spreadsheet dated August 3rd, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the purchase of electrical parts for the Millwood Water Treatment Plant Motor Control Center from Cayman Automation, Teterboro, New Jersey, for the total cost of $7,200 as per the quote as stated, dated April 13th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I can pull, I think I have that too. Let's see here. I move to authorize the town environmental coordinator to apply for a DEC grant under the Hudson River Estuary Communities Local Stewardship Planning Grant Program to support natural resource planning under the category Conservation of Natural Resources by creating a natural resource inventory, open space inventory index, open space plan conservation overlay zone, open space funding feasibility study or connectivity plan, and to hereby support the matching of funds between $1,575 and $7,500.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I move to authorize releasing a request for proposals for composing a natural resource inventory for the town of Newcastle. The award of said RFP is contingent on the receipt of the DEC grant under the Hudson River Estuary Communities Local Stewardship Planning Grant Program.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I am unable to download the last one, so if someone else has it, they could take over.
We have 2 more.
Okay,
I
then,
think there's 3 more actually.
Oh, gosh.
I have to pull them now.
I've got them here. I've got the proclamations.
I've got, who, Jeremy, you got it, or Lisa?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
We also have the one from Nick for the banners on the
oh, I
trunk.
have I think I have the banners one.
Okay.
We'll work together. Teamwork makes the dream work. Be it resolved that the town board hereby adopts the attached policy for banners across South Greeley Avenue and Chappaqua Millwood Triangle signs and requests the town administrator update all appropriate forms as applicable.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, I
Resistant.
move to adopt the following resolution. Whereas Arbor Day was first observed in 1872 with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed through the nation and the world. And whereas trees are a renewable resource and help to reduce erosion, moderate temperature, lower heating and cooling costs, clean the air, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees in Newcastle increase property value, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and renewal. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board in Newcastle proclaims Friday, April 30th, 2021 as 2021's Arbor Day in the town of Newcastle. And be it further resolved that the town board urges all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day, to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, and to plant and care for trees in furtherance of the happiness and well-being of this and future generations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Lisa, do you mind if I read this next one?
No, of course.
I move to adopt the following resolution, whereas during Asian Pacific Heritage Month, we celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to our economic, cultural spirit, and political development. I'm sorry, I'm getting choked up a little. And whereas Asian Pacific Heritage Month grew out of the establishment in 1978 of Asian Pacific American Heritage Week, created by the representatives Frank Horton of New York and Norman Waimanetta of California, and Senators Daniel K. Inouye and Spark Matsunaga from Hawaii signed into legislation by President Jimmy Carter. And whereas the town of Newcastle selects the theme for the observance of Asian Pacific Heritage Month in May 2021 as solidarity, community engagement, and celebration. And whereas the observance of Asian Pacific Heritage Month calls our attention to the continued need to battle racism and build a society that lives up to its democratic ideals. And whereas the town of Newcastle continues to work toward becoming an inclusive community in which all citizens, past, present, and future, are respected and recognized for their contributions and potential contributions to our community, the state, and the country, and the world. And whereas the town of Newcastle is proud to honor the history and contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in our community throughout our state and nation. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Newcastle, New York declares May 2021 to be Asian Pacific Heritage Month.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well done.
You're awesome, Lauren.
Indeed, indeed.
That was really beautiful. Thank you. So I think that brings us to the end of this evening's agenda.
There's actually just,
Oh,
Okay.
there's more, but wait, there's more.
oh wait, there's more. So one of the things that we talked about is that there was actually change order number 41, which reduced the ELQ contract by underruns of $324, $324,902.33. So we just need the approval of that change order as well.
So just so move it.
That's in our favor. That's a really good one.
So moved as reflected by our great administrator.
Second.
Jill, do you know? Wait, Jill, do you know her?
Aye.
Great administrator.
I don't know.
Just say aye, Jerry.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. Okay. I think we're done.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.